Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. As you can see from the title, we've got a guest, and it's very exciting. We've got a very exciting chat ahead. But before we get to that, I think it's important to mention that Magical Learning is a podcast that's been running for over 5 years, and it's part of a business that's been running for over 25 years. That's a training and facilitation company. Now, it's partnered with global thought leaders like John Mattone and Robin Sharma to bring you education from experts around the world. And today, we've got something a little bit special for you. We've got our expert, Bernadette. Now, Bernadette Schwerdt, how are you going this week? How's things?
I am great. Thank you, Jess. I've just released my book. It's come out after about a year in preparation. So it's nice to see this little baby come into the world.
Well, we're excited to be chatting to you about it because, like I said, we love to get people the freshest information. This book is just out, so I think this is the perfect time to be chatting about some of the findings in it. Now, Bernadette, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for listeners that might be joining you for the first time here?
Sure. Look, I'm the founder of the Australian School of Copywriting, and I help people write content that gets them on page one of Google and gets them to be the thought leader in their section. And that led into becoming a ghostwriter and helping CEOs write their thought leadership pieces that become evergreen assets. So, yeah, I'm a content creator in the content world.
Exactly. And I mean, before we even get into your book, you also have another thing that I really like, which is for people that are thinking, you've got a really broad spectrum of knowledge about business. You're also a judge of the Australian Business Book Awards. You have been for the last couple of years as well. So not only a writer, but you're also a judge. You've got a lot of perspective on what good copy looks like. So we're very happy to have you on today.
Yeah, it's been a great privilege to do that because you get to see literally hundreds of books. And as a ghostwriter, that's part of my professional development. So I can sort of bring a lot to the clients I work with because I go, if you want to win an award, here's how to do it. Of course, I recuse myself from the room whenever my books, come into to judgment, of course.
Well, I mean, that's great. And I think that is going to set us up really nicely because you are someone that really understands like the copywriting space, but also a lot of these really interesting secrets of new online entrepreneurs, which is the new book you've got as well. So you were just saying it's taken a year, but it's now out here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book and a little bit about what it's about?
Thanks, Jess. Well, I wrote the book because back in 2015, I wrote my first book called Secrets of Online Entrepreneurs. And I wrote that because I had the School of Copywriting. We sold online courses and I kind of maxed out my marketing knowledge. And I thought, who knows more than I do? So I reached out to the best in Australia and they very kindly talked to me. That became a TV show and it became a book. In 2020, the publisher came back and said, could you write a second one, like a sequel? I said, great. So I went back to those same people, see what happened to them. Some evolved, some listed, some delisted. Added new interviews for that. And then here we are 6 years later, I'm back again with my trilogy. So I've had this kind of decade of exposure to the best online entrepreneurs in the country. And I've seen them over a long period. So I've seen how they've moved, shifted, shaped, pulled back, went forward. And of course, I've overlaid that with my own marketing experience. I've been working in advertising agencies. I've been a corporate trainer, been an actor. I've done a lot of things. And so I've tried to bring all of that to this book through my lens as a small business owner. So I kind of wrote the book I wanted to read.
Wow. Well, I mean, you couldn't have picked a more interesting decade to talk about becoming an online business owner. I mean, how much has happened 2016 to now? I think we're going to have to get into Danette's question because that kind of tees us up, but we're going to have to go down a lot of rabbit holes here because this is a really fascinating topic that you've teed us up for. And you're right, it's the kind of book that a lot of people want to read right now. So Danette, our Director of Learning, has written in this question, and Danette is currently over in Geneva right now. So thanks, Danette. Hope you're enjoying your trip, doing a bit of a work trip there. She's asked, what are the basics someone should know for starting a new online business in 2026?
Well, I want to make the distinction about online because you might be thinking, well, we're all online and we are, but some are more online than others. And also, bricks and mortar businesses need to be online as well. So I just want to make the point that there's the whole spectrum of being online. And if you're not placing yourself forward in the online space, you're losing out. So even just on a personal brand level, Janine Ellis, for example, is one of the people that I interviewed for my book, the founder of Boost Juice. And she said quite categorically that when she was building Boost, it was going well, but when she stepped out from behind her desk and became the brand, a personal brand, and really took time to craft her story, her backstory, her speech and presentation skills, and sought out media opportunities, things went ballistic. And suddenly, every time she spoke, she was shining the light on Boost. So she became sort of interchangeable between Boost and Janine. So the personal brand is one of the key things that I think business owners need to think about. And it's actually quite confronting because they're thinking, I just want to run my business. I'm an accountant, I'm a lawyer, I'm a farmer, whatever. I don't want to be online, but do that at your peril, So I think that sense of sharing your thoughts, your knowledge, your wisdom, your insights in an authentic way. Like I make that point too. Like I talk to a lot of social media superstars, big players, but also small people who you've never heard of, but doing exceptionally well in their world. And what they say is they go, I can only speak from my own experience. I can only be authentic. And if people criticize that or they're trolling or there's haters, I deal with that because I say, that wasn't my intention. I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to serve. So I think it takes a bit of mental resilience as well to actually have the confidence to post. And that would be my next point. Just post. Like you can't get anywhere if you're not posting. And I personally struggle with that myself because I'd rather just create for others, but I had to create for myself as well. So when you commit to posting on things that you are passionate about, that you know a lot about, that you want to talk about for a while, and that's another point, you've got to be comfortable with your topic for 5 years, really. You've got to own that space. So there's a couple of ideas there, Jess.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I think that already tees us up for a really nice kind of follow on there because I'm really fascinated by some of the sort of ideas you've brought up there. Even just the concept of like, if you've got a business, you're going to have to be the face of it, which I think a lot of people may not be thinking about too much. So do you maybe just want to talk a little bit about that? Because you've had to do this a little bit yourself, you're saying, and it's not always the most comfortable journey. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that is probably the barrier to them even doing a lot of this stuff. So do you want to talk a little bit about your journey with that? That's so fascinating.
100%, Jess. I just did a presentation recently for female film producers, and these are smart women, but there's a lot of, and this is not just particular to them, but imposter syndrome. Who do I think I am that I've got something to share? Why would people want to listen to me? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in your head around why would I do this? And I guess you just got to come from that position of how can I help my community? How can I help my cohort, whoever it might be, do what they do better? So a lot of the time it's about mental resilience. How can you just keep flipping the script so that rather than it be about you, it's like, how can I help? And things like even just start small. It might be go onto LinkedIn and just comment or like or share. Don't even post. Just be present and start helping other people amplify their profiles. And then eventually you might think, I'm going to write a little story or, maybe comment on something that you've attended or something that you've done, or even turn like a testimonial into a case study. But even if you do that, always think about it from the perspective of the listener, like what's in it for them rather than just performative promotion. It's like, well, what can they learn from this case study? So I think that's the other thing that's shifting is this sense of everyone's weary of just promotion of themselves. And we kind of get sick of ourselves as well. So I think, again, flip it and think, well, what's in it for this reader to read this post? So that would be the first thing I'd say. The way I built my business back in the day was speaking. I just went on the speaking circuit, and I'm not talking about the corporate getting paid $10,000-$20,000 a gig. I spoke for free. I'd go to events where there was like 200, 300, 400 people, and the deal was you speak for free, but you can promote whatever you do to the audience. So I built my database really quickly. That would be the next thing. Email is gold. Like we focus a lot on social media and getting followers, and often they're just vanity metrics. They don't actually deliver a sale. And people get tired of that too because I'm doing all this work and posting and putting myself out there and I'm not getting anything. If you use social to be a funnel for your database, then once that email address lands in your database, then you own that. And therefore you've got the right to market to them and build that relationship. And that's actually what I'm seeing, because I think there was a while back there, people thought email is dead. It could not be further from the truth. Email is rising again. If it ever did die, it's rising again because ownership of the platform is what people are focusing on now. Because we know LinkedIn and Facebook, whatever, you've got to pay to play and they can change the rules. And there's been a few people that I've documented and interviewed who lost their entire profiles and business because they were banned for things that they didn't actually do. So I think you've got to take control of your brand, your database, your platforms. And that's absolutely what I'm seeing is this pulling it back.
Yeah, wow, it's so fascinating because what you've just been talking about is a really interesting sort of countered topic to what Graham's question is. Graham's written in here, which is about the use of AI, because you're talking so much about, humans and almost authenticity in some ways, that, and so I guess let's dive into an AI question because that feels kind of on the sort of a counterbalance here. So we hear a lot about AI these days. What role is it playing in the online business world?
I think you've just touched on it, that when you have AI in your face and you can see the content that's being created by AI, and it's very observable to me because it's observable to most. What do we feel about that? We go, I don't resonate. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't connect. And I think the opportunity is for brands and personal brands, business leaders, is to go, I'm going to write stuff for myself. Now, I use AI, don't get me wrong. It's amazing and we should all use it, but with consideration about what are we actually putting out there, and how can we make that more personal and more human-centered. So I think that's the opportunity here. We've got these tools that enable us to create content very quickly, and videos and images and decks and code and whatnot. But how are we using it? And if we can still remember that the other person needs to believe that it's coming from a real person, I think that's critical. But also don't not use it. And in fact, some of the groups I've been talking to have been quite reluctant. It's almost like they feel it's cheating, um, to write something with AI. And I said, well, it's a bit like saying, I'm not going to use my computer anymore. I'd rather write it by pen. I'm not going to drive my car to the supermarket. I'm going to go by horse. It's like there are resources here that we can use. It's going to get us to where we're going quicker, but it's the way you do it. So, yeah, I think you've got to acknowledge things like customer service. I went to book a hotel recently, and I'm not kidding. I was waiting for a good 25 minutes. This was an international hotel, and I'm like, wow, I just want to check my booking, you know. And I thought, why aren't they using AI? That was my first thought. And one of the men that I interviewed in my book was a digital marketer, Ben Futro, and he uses AI and helps his clients use AI too. And one example he used that I thought was really relevant was a tow truck company. They provide tow trucks. And what they're doing is they have AI answer the phone, they triage it, if you like, and they make sure it gets to the right spot. Do you need to book one? Do you need to confirm one? You don't need to know when it's coming. Do you want to pay for it? All that kind of stuff is being dealt with by the AI because it's not emotional, it's transactional. And it can be done very quickly. And also those things are critical from a time point of view. Those people are in a hurry. They need a tow truck now. And what that does, it frees up the real people to be working on other things that could be considered more high value. And that's a phrase that we're hearing a lot now, high value people, which is kind of unfortunate because it just renders people value by their functionality. But that's the reality we live in. And the high value people, irrespective of what kind of, role they're in, if they can demonstrate value, they're going to stick around and they're going to be prized. Those who offer low value will probably go. So that's not a bad lens to be looking at yourself if you are an employee about, am I a high value person? But back to the tow truck. So when this company was doing Google, pay-per-click, and they had tons and tons of, people coming through, they couldn't actually cope with the phone calls. So a lot of those phone calls were just going out, and all that investment in SEO was being wasted. So when they applied the AI customer service agent to it, all those phone calls could be answered because it was not dependent on the individual. So from just a cost saving, not only were they reducing their SEO costs because they didn't need so many, new customers, but the customers that were coming through could be actually serviced properly and helpfully.
Wow. Well, that's such an interesting answer. I had no idea where this question was going to go when I read it from Graham. So I'm so fascinated. I love that. Great answer. And I think it's actually I'm wondering if it relates to our next question here from Marg, who's written in about more of your marketing kind of background here, I think. But it still is about smaller businesses. Here's Marg's question: for a small business owner with a limited marketing budget, what is the highest leverage activity they can do today to attract more clients?
There's a couple of things. The first one is you could actually hire a social media influencer. And a lot of people maybe don't consider that because they don't think they're big enough. But you don't need to spend a lot of money. to leverage someone else's database. So if you find an influencer who's maybe using your product already, got a decent audience, lots of engagement, resonate with your values, you could reach out to them and say, hey, would you like to use my product? Here it is. These are the terms of, engagement. Let's see how it goes. And just dip your toe in the water of using an influencer, because so many people are and getting great results. So it doesn't cost a lot, right? Because you're just trying it out. Maybe try a few influencers, not the big, mega influencers, the Nicole Kidmans or the, Ricky Pontings. Just use, and these people are often not even known by other people, but they're known in their community. And likewise, you could even become a social media influencer yourself. If you've got a few, people on your list, be it email or LinkedIn or Insta, wherever it might be, or YouTube, you can present yourself as an influencer and make some decent money on the side. And there's all these different platforms that you can now upload all your content, your videos, your whatever, and people can start looking for you as an influencer. So it's like a directory. And it doesn't cost, to list. You can just put yourself out there and see who comes to you. And it can happen quite quickly. One of my, this is actually not even in the book, but a very close girlfriend of mine, Jenny Fisher, her name is, and her handle is Foster Jen 2072. And Jen is a foster cat person. So Jen has got, I think, 8 cats and 5 dogs in her home, pet lover writ large, and very passionate about protecting cats because they're being put down if they don't find a home. So what she did, she got quite a big property. She built this beautiful cat enclosure, and it was like the Taj Mahal for cats. It had like jumping blocks, it had hammocks, it had water features, all sorts of knickknacks, and it was extravagant. And she filmed it and she said, this is what I've done. And it was just for her, really, just to help people locally. If they couldn't support their cat, they can bring them to her and she'd look after them till they found a home. She filmed it, right? And she's quite a glamorous looking person anyway, but that's by the by. This video went ballistic. She went from 0 followers. She only started December 2025. 10,000 followers, 20,000 followers, 33,000 followers. That's where she's at right now. But the point is, all these brands want to work with her now. So they're reaching out going, hey, I've got this cat food, this cat litter, this cat kennel, these cat accessories. Can you promote it for us? So she never intended to monetize her Instagram page, but that's what it's become. And she's putting it all back into the cat enclosure anyway. But you can start small like that. Another thing you could do is partner. One of the best things I ever did about 8 years ago, running the School of Copywriting, one of my competitors, if you like, was the Australian Writers Centre. And I knew vaguely of the woman who ran it, which was Valerie Khoo. And I approached her and I said, look, you're doing all these amazing writing courses, but you don't have a copywriting course. Would you like me to provide the content for that? We can do like a partnership. She goes, great. We've been working together for 8 years. We've trained literally tens of thousands of people in how to write content. So it's kind of a white label relationship. It's branded under her name, but I provide the content. My content gets seen and marketed by this marketing machine. Like Valerie is so good at the marketing of her business. And that's been a wonderful partnership. So, if people are thinking about, they've got competitors, maybe they could stay close to those people and maybe do some kind of, distribution deal. Because if you stay close to your competitors, there might be more in common than you think.
Wow, these are some really great insights. These are like we haven't really talked too much with other people about sort of working together with your competitors to actually build something that I guess is better, and that's something that feels a little more even doable in a more online kind of business space, because there's not huge like stock you're moving and trying to integrate. It's a bit more sort of like you're saying, courses and stuff. That I love this. That's such a good idea, and I need to check out this cat palace. I just built my my cat a little cardboard hovel recently,
Oh,
and so now I need to get some inspo. Yeah.
Everyone's loving what she's doing. And the point being, she's not really a public person. And she was not that keen on being the public face. But when she realized that her profile could lend credence and credibility to the foster world, people just really resonated with that because she was authentic. She wasn't trying to be anything she wasn't. She was saying, look, this is what I've done and this is what I'm trying to do. If you can help or you can be inspired by me, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's so interesting again that word authentics come back again here, which is fascinating. And I think we might have to cover it again just separately, but I wanted to talk a little bit about my question here, because when I was looking at, not only all the topics, but a lot of the people you're talking to, there's a lot of journalism that's gone in here. You've had to do a bit of questions, asking back and forth and sort of putting bits and pieces together here. So I guess for me, my question is, what was the most surprising part of doing the research for this book? Was there anything that stood out to you as something that you went, wow, that really stopped me in my tracks?
Well, I had a lot of content. That was surprising. I had literally hundreds of thousands of words about how do I string this together, but that's, I don't think, your question. What I found surprising was the question I get asked all the time is, what do they all have in common? And that's in a way why I wrote the book, because I really wanted a blueprint for, like, what do these people do differently that others don't? And what it came down to was they know what they're really good at, they know what they're not good at, and they build a bridge to bridge that gap. So that was the first thing. The second thing is they don't take things personally, which I found really interesting. When you operate at that level, you've got, like, Adam Schwab, for example, Luxury Escapes, 600 staff, $1 billion turnover. Radek Sali, he built Swiss up from, I think, 30 staff or 15 staff and 30 million to 2.1 billion in just 10 years. The things that I'm being told by these people and the sort of the way they move through the world is they can have the most stand-up, debates, arguments, fights, whatever you want to call it, with X, Y, Z. And the next minute they're actually saying, so did you catch that film the other week? Wasn't it amazing? They're able to compartmentalize work from relationship. And I think that's really challenging for a lot of people, including myself. So I've seen that they don't take things personally, which I think is a huge thing. And the way Radek, for example, Radek was the CEO of Swiss Vitamins or Swiss Wellness. And I ghost-wrote his book with him. I co-authored his book, so I know his story really well. But he would say that he'd go into Chemist Warehouse and try and do their distribution deals, and they would yell at them, because Chemist Warehouse were renowned for being quite tough on their suppliers. And, they'd leave the meeting and they're a little bit, browbeaten. And one of Radek's colleagues said to him, don't take it the wrong way. In fact, take it as a positive. If they weren't that tough on you, it shows they didn't care. They're being tough on you because they care. So it was an interesting flip and reframe of what negative or critical feedback looks like. So that was another thing. Relentlessly competitive, I would say. These people do not say die, and they do not give up, even when the chips are absolutely against them. One time with Radek, with Swiss, they were hired Nicole Kidman and Oprah Winfrey. What's her name again? Ellen. All these big names to promote the product in America. And so everything was driven to distribution in this particular pharmacy outlet. When Radek got to America and was walking the aisles of the pharmacy, because all the advertising was started, they could not find any Swiss products. There was like one box hidden under a shelf. He said, where's all our products? We spent all these millions driving interest and action, and there's no products to be sold. And that was a big turning point. It was like, should we just give up? This is just such a monumental error. And he said, no, we got to turn this into, something positive. And you have to read the book to find out what they did. But they did. But only because Radek had that sense of a commitment to, like, I'm not going to let this beat me. And that's the common quality I've seen is this. When most people kind of give up because they've run the end of the road, these people just keep on going. And that, I think, is born. I don't think you can nurture that. I think that inherent do or die spirit is something you're born with.
That is such a fascinating thing. Bernadette, I used to do stand-up comedy for a little while. And it was fascinating, like there was a certain tier, obviously there's famous people, and then there's people that are doing it regularly, and then there's people that are doing it regularly and not getting paid, and then there's just sort of the other mix of people that do it semi-regularly. And what you find with that sort of second last group, people that do it regularly but aren't getting paid, is they're not even necessarily that good at stand-up comedy. They just don't quit, and so people, if they're booking a room, even if this person's not that funny, they know that this person knows how to be on stage, and that at a moment's notice, you can be like, hey, we've had someone drop out. Do you want to come do this? They'll definitely say yes. So it's kind of fascinating, like even what you're just saying there, because that really resonated with me. I remember thinking, like, how are these people getting so many nights? And then I realized they've been doing it for 10 years and they're doing it 4 nights a week, and they're not getting paid. They're just doing it for the love of it.
Exactly. And that's another point. The concept of doing an apprenticeship in your business really resonated throughout all the interviews, where they go, we sometimes watch these entrepreneurs grace the stage and pick up the awards and ring the stock exchange bell and all that kind of stuff, and they look like it's just effortless. If you unpick that story, which I've done, you'll see it's been at least 10 years in the making. And I think people think their success is going to be quick because that's what it appears to be, in the newspaper stories. So that would be, I think, an important lesson is have a long-term vision. And often when people say, it's going to take you 10 years to succeed, they go, I don't want to spend 10 years doing this. It's like, well, maybe you're not in the right business. What could you spend 10 years in? Because that might be how long it's going to take. So it's a good litmus test.
Yeah, well, that's a great insight. I think that's a great question people can ask themselves. I'm going to go over to Allegra's question here. Allegra's has written in, what industries are good for new online entrepreneurs? What versus what might not be so hot right now?
I love that question, Jez, because I think any industry has potential, and it's the way you look at it. And I introduced in the book concept of the pendulum. And if you look at the way a pendulum works, it swings from side to side. And when it swings from one particular side and gets really, heavily populated in that particular section, what it does is it leaves a gap in its wake. It leaves a vacuum. And it's in the vacuum and the wake the opportunity lives. So taking, for example, right now, we live in a world that's filled with noise. And we've, got physical noise, like you wake up and there's the lawnmower, there's a leaf blower, there's a dog barking, cars parking, then you come to work and there's emails and social and music and, we're inundated with noise. So if you look at that on one side of the pendulum, what does it leave in its wake? What's the opposite of that? And it's silence and stillness. And any company who can leverage that has an opportunity. They've got a need, a demand is there. And this is playing out right now. If you look at the Calm app, that's worth over $2 billion. It's just an app which tells you how to be quiet. It's not even giving any knowledge, it's just noise. It's just like white noise or, orms. So that I think is interesting. And you look at the expansion of the silence industry, things like quiet cafes, Coles and Woolies are doing quiet times on certain nights. You've got quiet carriages on trains. You've got digital detox cruises. Even Tim Gurner, he's an entrepreneur in Melbourne. He's created these things called St. Haven, these wellness sanctuaries, and they're like up to $400 a week membership. And they're just beautiful resorts of, quietness and sanctuary. And yet people are paying, the premium for silence is there. So rather than me say, oh, this is a trend and that's a trend, my suggestion would be in your own world, business, ecosystem, look at what there's a lot of and think, what's the opposite of that? That is where the potential resides. So even as we've been talking, human connection, like we're all jumping into the AI, technical, anonymous, amorphous world. What's the opposite of that is human-centeredness. So things like events, print media, slow media, no more performative promotion, ownership of the platform, all these kinds of things are in response to the AI.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great topic that I think a lot of people are talking about now is, we sort of talk about it as de-technologizing a little bit, but it's like kind of working out how to, it's really the first time in history that we have to actually put our own brakes on how much we use technology. Because before this, it hasn't really been a problem. The technology hasn't been good enough to captivate us for a whole day. It was too boring or too slow or too inefficient, but now you kind of have to put your own sort of guards on there. So it's great conversation. I wanted to talk about one thing that you actually mentioned that really sparked something interesting in me, which is, you're talking about, rest and silence is something that it's now a commodity. You have to almost kind of go and buy it in a way. And when you're talking about the Calm app, it even kind of, there's a small irony to me in that it feels like it's the most efficient, relaxing. It's like we've almost applied efficiency to the thing that's meant to be rest, in some ways. It's kind of fascinating when you're describing it there. So anyway.
Yeah, that's another pendulum swing. You've got these tech bros who are obsessed with longevity, biohacking, keeping life going, efficiency to the max. And what's the opposite of that? It's all slowing down, eye contact, people connection, being, polite, nice to people rather than pushing in and, putting yourself forward. It's like, well, what's the opposite of everything that we're seeing? Like the go fast, break things mantra from Facebook. Maybe it's go slow and make things.
Well, that's a very nice kind of change to that, and I like the positive spin that that puts on things. I wanted to jump onto people. Speaking of people that make things, let's jump into Alan's question here. And Alan's written: is this something people who like to use their hands for work, like a farmer, might be able to apply the principles of?
I absolutely think they can and should. Like if you're a farmer, for example, one of my clients that I ghostwrote for, his name's Kobe Siman. He was a business coach and accreditation expert, and he made his millions through selling that particular business. But what his passion was building and farming. Right. So when he retired, and he's quite a young man because of the success he had, he bought a farm. And he created a meat business. So he owns the cattle, he owns the land, he owns the whole, kind of system. And now he's got a website dedicated to selling beautiful, premium grass-fed meat. And it's direct from him to the customer. So all those chains in the middle are eliminated so that the pricing can be, optimized. I think that's just a really good example. He's blending his passion with a product that people need, which is meat. It's very expensive now, meat, and also high quality meat, and giving it to people at a good price. Direct. They can order it today and it's probably there tomorrow. I don't quite know the delivery details, but it's not far away. So that's one idea. But the other one is, what can you teach people? Like if you are a coppersmith or a jeweler or something like that, you know something. Why not put some of your videos online about how others can make their own? Maybe charge money and you become a course creator. Share and monetize your knowledge as well as selling the things that you make. And the example there I use is Kirsten Tibbles, and she's in my book, and she's a Master Chef judge. She's a chocolate queen. She's got the Chocolate Queen show on Foxtel, SBS. And she started off as a baker, did an apprenticeship on the Mornington Peninsula. And she wasn't able to go to school. She had a health issue. So she left school at 15, became a really, really good baker of chocolate and pastries, and decided that, she'd travel the world and do lots of comps so she could sort of build up a profile. And then this chocolate equipment manufacturer said to her, hey, why don't you run a course and use my equipment to make the stuff so I can promote my stuff, but you can use my warehouse and all that kind of stuff. So she did, and she had 6 people per course, and that sold out, and the next course sold out. And before you know it, she built her own training school called Savor Patisserie. And now she's got 20,000 people in her community every month paying $20 a month. So you can do the numbers, all because of her passion for chocolate. So the makers of the world, you can absolutely help people, learn from what you've done and also sell it. She sells, the way she makes a lot of money is she sells all her equipment and chocolate beads and beans and, molds and spatulas and whatnot. It's all beautifully connected on the website. So it's an incredibly seamless operation. She's only got 13 staff. And yet, she's got a big operation. She's on MasterChef. She's got a TV show. She's got cookbooks. She does tours. She's a distributor for Calabo chocolate. So, she's an expert. The apprenticeship that we talked about, she lives it.
Well, I mean, Bernadette, that's all our questions for today from the team, but this has really left me with a really interesting thing, because what I think you tied up really nicely at the end there, which is, you put in the context of sort of farming and also chocolate as well, but it's again about authenticity. This comes back to, what do these people really want to do? What are their real passions? And then obviously for them, once they're really pursuing their real passion, it's so easy to sell it because they know why they're passionate about this sort of stuff. And I think that from this conversation today, one thing that I've really been able to take away as a skill that you have that I really like is you can see a connection between what people want to do, sort of how there's a way to monetize that makes sense, and they can sort of pursue their passion. And I think that's a very powerful skill. And I think it's been demonstrated across how much you've been able to take away from all these different experts that you sort of talked with and sort of done a bit of research for. So yeah, I just think what a fascinating conversation, because do you have any sort of comments on that about how you're able to do that?
Oh, that's a really lovely comment. And I think it's a function of just being a bit older as well, Jez, and being around and having done so many occupations and roles. But also there's a hedgehog complex here. There's a template from Jim Collins, which is know your passion, know what you're good at, what pays. They're your three circles. You put those Venn circles together, and in the sweet spot is what you should be doing. And even like I do this with my students. One of them came to me and said she loves wine, tourism, and food. I said, well, niche, what's your niche going to be? And she goes, I don't know. I said, pick one. She goes, wine. She knew a lot about wine. She loved it. And the wine industry pays. So she, got a job at Treasury Wine Estate, writing copy for wine, because she knew when she went to seek what she should type in. So often it's just focusing your mind, not too many options, but narrowing it down to go, well, if I was to put this into a job title and a job, a company, what would I type in? And from there, you can just see what comes your way.
Wow. Well, I think that's a great lesson for people that they can start here and go, where's the authenticity coming from, and sort of angle and shoot out that way, I think is a great thing. Bernadette, what an amazing conversation. I've sort of shared, I've taken so many notes. I mean, authenticity definitely is the word that sticks out to me, but it feels in this case slightly differently because it's coming from, I'm seeing how you're involving passion as part of that. It's not just a sort of word that you're saying. There's an element of how do we actually really find an element of the authenticity that we're really looking for, not just, our business is authentic and then we don't know what exactly that means. But there's so many actual real practical tips in here. I still think that co-branding concept is really fascinating with a competitor. And sort of, are you at least doing something with them in a way that can integrate both your brands? And yeah, I think you've just given us a lot of stuff. But did you have any final thoughts today or anything that we didn't pick up on?
No, I think just post, you got to get started. And just the first one is often difficult. So just keep it really simple. And from there, and it will just keep the audience in mind. What are their problems? FAQ, write them down, answer the problems. That becomes the basis of your copy. That's how we write copy, So just post.
Well, I think that's a great place to start. And you said even if people don't feel like posting, they can even do that smaller little thing and or comment or something. Just dip the toes in the water and build up the confidence. So even there was another skill built in. Bernadette, people would have been listening to this and going, you know what, I need to contact Bernadette or I need to get a copy of this book. So do you want to tell us a little bit about where people can contact you or where they can grab a copy of your book, Secrets of the New Online Entrepreneurs?
Sure, they can have a free sample if they'd like to read a chapter, try before they buy, and they can get that at bernadetteschwerdt.com.au. They can find me on Instagram at Bernadette Schwerdt, obviously LinkedIn, and the book's available in all good bookstores, including bad bookstores, which I don't think they exist, but they always say it's good bookstores. I think, well, does that mean there's bad? That's just me being silly. So yeah, Booktopia, Amazon, Demix, wherever you go, and hopefully they can read it and get some insights.
Well, that's great. And I think, you know what, if people do find it in a bad bookstore, please comment somewhere so that we can know that it's available everywhere and what that actually looks like. Because I also don't know if a bad bookstore exists. Bernadette, thank you so much for being on today. As people will see, this episode is very late in the 290s, which is very exciting. So we've got episode 300 coming up. And so, Bernadette, we're very happy to have you as one of our final guests before episode 300. And thank you to all our listeners and everybody that's been sharing. We're now over 20,000 subscribers, which is very exciting. So thank you to everybody that's been sharing. And as always, everybody, have a magical week.